morning, everyone. My name is Sergeant Buckles. Okay, I'm with Base Safety. I'm the resident combat engineer for over there. I've been there a little over 2 years. And today we're going to be going over supervisor safety. So a little bit of formalities before we begin. Give me 1 second. Okay. So formalities, roster, it's getting passed around right now. Exits and muster. So there's exits all over the building. The ones to your direct front probably be the easiest. We'll meet up right in the parking lot, get accountability, and then follow on instructions from there. Restrooms are directly to the back. If you guys need to use the restroom, feel free to get up at any time. This course is going to run about 2.5, 3 hours. It's scheduled for 4, but I'm going to try and get you guys out of here a little bit earlier. We'll probably take 1 break depending on how people are digesting the information. And then class policies, that's really nothing, just be a good dude, no falling asleep, no nothing like that. Drink, snacks, smoke pits is obviously outside, 50 feet away from the building. And then drink, snacks, I don't care, you guys do what you want. Just if you do have a dip can or dip bottle, just make sure it's got a cap so we don't spill anything over for the theater. Okay, so what are we going over today? This is supervisor safety. So all of you, I would presume, is E4 and above. We have a lot of leadership in here, a lot of staff to know. So this pertains to everyone. What it is it is a requirement, which I'll get to in a second, is a requirement for you to attend some form of supervisor safety. Now at Base Safety Department, we offer the supervisor safety that's put on by us, but also OSHA has their own regulatory class that you guys can take. So if you guys need annual refreshers, or if you have new personnel that come in, they can either sign up with Base Safety. We offer the class there. It's just a limited amount of seats. That's why we're doing this. Or OSHA has their own on OSHA.gov, their website. So, but what it is the 29 CFR 1960. So the 29 CFR is the OSHA standard for this particular portion, so supervisor safety and their responsibilities. Now, OSHA is the governing body. They're a federal agency, and what they do is they take care of everything occupational safety and health-wise. And then you might be asking yourself, well, I'm a United States Marine. Does that fall under me? And the short answer is yes. Now, there are certain exceptions to that rule in what we call a military unique situation. But for the most part, 99% of everything that OSHA comes out with, the Marine Corps has a standard that follows that same, rule or regulation. So that, just to clear the air on that, we all do still fall under federal OSHA. So what are the responsibilities for supervisor safety? Minimum supervisor safety requirements, 29 CFR 1960. Employees who exercise supervisor functions shall, anytime they say shall, this is kind of a misnomer, is they're requiring that you do it. It's one of the ways that the lawyers who write this up, they put that in there to CYA for themselves. So anytime you see shall, it's you are doing it. So shall, to the extent of their authority, furnish employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So that first statement right there is what we're going to be going over, is how to recognize hazards, how to implement controls, kind of like almost like a risk management process as far as occupational safety goes, so that you guys can implement that in your units to provide a safer work environment for your Marines and sailors. They shall also comply with occupational safety and health standards applicable to their agency and with all rules, regulations, and orders issued by the head of the agency with respect to the agency occupational safety and health program. It's a lot of words that are saying the same thing. So, supervisor responsible for safe, healthful workplace, this general duty clause, which we'll go over in the slide in the near future. OSHA standard applies to all workplaces supervised. So that's what I was saying in the beginning, it does apply to all of us. Training specified to develop employee skills to manage safety in the workplace. Words. So more words that lawyers like to put together, but what I do want to go over is these first sentences. So employees shall comply with the standard rules and regulations set forth by the OSHA Act, which we're going to go over. Employees shall use safe equipment, PPE, and other devices and procedures directed by the agency necessary for their protection. Employees shall have the right to report unsafe, unhealthful, which we will go over in the future on how you guys can do that reporting process. Employees shall be authorized official time to participate in the activities provided for in the section of 19 of the Act. So, what that's saying is all of you should be here during working hours. If any of you are here outside of working hours, that's bad to go. That's all that's stating right there. So if you guys have DoD civilian or contractors and you do want to conduct training, make sure it's during working hours. It's really all that's saying. This is that general duty clause that I was talking about earlier. So OSHA Act of 1970. So these two people right here, these are the last names of those two people. They are the ones who came up with the OSHA Act 1970. And that is what started OSHA, is them coming up with this. Each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment and place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are likely to cause death or physical harm. In the safety world, we call that IDLH, imminent danger to life and health. Shall comply with occupational safety and health standards promulgated under this act. Sorry, screwed that word up. This is the NAVMC. So what I said in the beginning is OSHA is that regulatory body, and then you're always going to find a standard that the Marine Corps or the Navy in general implements. This is one of those. Take a look over these bullet points right here. This is what it covers. The 30,000 foot view, this is what it covers. The general safety, HAZCOM, LODO, which is a lockout tagout program that is for electrical safety and hazardous energy safe work practices. PPE, we all know PPE. Specialized training for assigned tasks. Specialized training for assigned tasks can be anything from people who are welders to the electricians, utilities, engineers that fall under the Marine Corps. Airside has a lot of this. They have their 4790. They do all of that. Falls pretty much under this. So culture. So I like to say, which was taught to me by my mentors when I first started safety, was we're not trying to, they asked me, they said, what are you trying to do with your safety program as you build it? And I said, well, identify hazards, mitigate risks. It's like a general, Marine Corps answer. Identify hazards, mitigate risks, attack the problem and solve it. And they said, no, it's not that. You're trying to build a safety culture. You're trying to change behavior. You're not trying to just check a box. You're trying to actually change behavior so that we can have a safe work practice. So what goes into that? Individual and group beliefs. For me, that's a big one because prior to this, I've had a somewhat safety background. I'm a combat engineer by trade, as I said earlier, so we do a lot of construction and we do deal with explosives, so there's a lot of safety that goes into that. But, as far as safe work practices, I never got a class like this. So I kind of was just out there implementing what we thought was safe. And so that's part of the culture. Just get it done now, I don't care how you do it. We're trying to change that so that we can not have as many mishaps and not have as many people get hurt. One of those is values. So what do you value? Do you value your physical, so your hands, toes, as we're going to go over as far as implementing safe work practices, or values, meaning if you know something's wrong and you're doing it, but you continue to do it, so your values and morals should tell you that's not wrong, or you should be able to stop and be like, hey Marine, hey, I know what you're doing, this is how you've been doing it for the last 10, 20 years, but that's not the way we should be doing it. Hey, can we try this? attitudes, perceptions, and unwritten patterns of behavior or rules. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Well, we've always done it this way. Well, I know you've always done it that way, and nothing's ever happened, but there still is that problem that is there, and it could happen. A little video for you guys.
This is the Bacardi bottling plant in Jacksonville, Florida. It's August 16, 2012 at 4:30 p.m. What you're seeing here is a palletizer, a machine that packs and stacks cases of rum onto a pallet. The man you see here operates the palletizer. He's been cleaning the machine because bottles often break into cases and the rum leaks on the conveyor belt, making it sticky. When this happens, the cases then crash into each other and bottles fall to the ground. This has been happening for a couple of years at Bacardi, and it hasn't been fixed. As the operator walks away, cases start coming down the line very quickly and crashing into each other. He hits the emergency stop button. Now what's supposed to happen next is operators need to put a lock on the machine to prevent somebody from pushing the start button while someone else is inside. Under the machine, there's a lot of shattered glass as seen in these photos. There's also another emergency stop button and some bars that you can put underneath the platform to keep it from falling. But employees rarely did this for fear of slowing down production. The man in the orange vest is Dave Davis. He's a temp worker on his first day on any job in his entire life. In fact, his shift started just an hour and a half ago when he sent this photo to his fiancée. The operator points down below and tells Davis to sweep up the glass under the machine. Look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. You'll see Davis go underneath the palletizer to sweep up the glass. A few minutes later, Davis goes back upstairs to ask a question. The man in the white shirt, who's a supervisor, told police he had told Davis to sit by the side, but others heard him tell Davis to simply go get some gloves. Davis goes back downstairs underneath the machine. The supervisor and operator finish cleaning the conveyor rollers above Davis. They close the gate and turn on the machine. Cases come down the line, they're pushed into a square, and the platform goes down. Then they hear a yell. They see that Davis has been crushed by the machine. They hit the stop button. The palletizer operator is trying to manually raise the platform off Davis, but it's not working. The supervisor radios for someone to call 911. Here you'll see a worker pass down a pry bar to see if they can lift up the platform. There were some 60 cases weighing about 2,000 pounds on the platform when it went down. First responders got there within minutes, but it was already too late. The weight of the machine had killed Davis.
So that video right there gets shown in a lot of different safety classes. And the reason for that is because that was, as you saw, it was his first day. No training, no nothing. And also a little bit of background on that. So the supervisor, the direct supervisor, he went to prison. And the manager also went to prison for, number one, you know, they did basically everything wrong, but also in addition to that, OSHA, the first thing that they do, I know it's kind of horrible that they do this, but it's legality. What do they look at first? They look at, was he trained? Where's the paperwork? What's the documentation stating that the supervisors were trained as well as the personnel? That's the first thing they look at. And someone died. You know, in my opinion, the first thing should be, okay, well, did we contact the family? Who's going to get in trouble for this? But is everybody else okay? But that's how serious it can get. 2 people ended up going to prison, and someone wasn't able to go home. Just for the simple fact of, you could have just looked and be like, hey, are you still in there? Communication. That didn't happen. So the severity of this is just that. It is real. Safety culture and challenges. Determine the level at which the safety culture are currently functioning or functions. Decide where you wish to take it. Chart and navigate the path from here to there. So this is how we're breaking it down on changing behavior. Who is responsible for the safety culture? I mean, that's all of us. Everyone in this room, from PFC all the way up to the CO. Leadership has a the primary responsibilities, that's all of you, must sustain a sound safety culture once it is established, all responsible for fostering and maintaining a sound safety culture. Every individual has a role to play, so that's all of us. And an individual expected to I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that, if coworker about to commit an unsafe act. So if you see something, say something. That's what that's. Any questions so far? RM, risk management. All of us should be relatively familiar with risk management and the process. These next group of slides is going to go over how it breaks down and how we're going to implement it in the Marine Corps. Some funny pictures for you right there. A little unsafe to me. Purpose of risk management. RM defined as enhancing hazard identification in the operational environment in order to eliminate risk or reduce them to an acceptable level. So this risk management process was first implemented by the Army and was called ORM, Operational Risk Management. They since have changed that to just risk management because what they identified was that it's not just in the operational environment, it's while we're still here in garrison in your everyday work environment. So they dropped the operational side of it and just called it risk management so that it could be implemented throughout. And then Marine Corps took that and they ran with it, and that's what we implemented for our risk management process. So RM follows a 5-step sequence with 3 levels of application. Closed loop process, applicable to most operational and organizational situations and environments. So 5-step process, not insulting any of you guys' intelligence. Most of us get this shoved down our throat, but first one we have is identify the hazards. So that's literally identifying what is wrong, self-explanatory. Assess the hazards, on what severity level is it. Develop the controls, implement those controls, and supervise and evaluate. So here are the levels at which we were talking about earlier. Occurs often in a career equipment service life, likely occurs several times in career equipment service life, occasionally, seldom, and unlikely. Can't assume, will not occur in career equipment service life. Those are the different levels. Then we have that first one, that IDLH that I was talking about earlier. You'll hear a lot of us in the safety world say IDLH as far as referring to that. And so imminent danger to life and health. Death or permanent total disability, system loss, major property damage. Critical, permanent partial disability, temporary total disability in excess of 3 months, and so on. Moderate, minor injury, maybe a lost work day, maybe they're in the hospital, what have you. Negligible, first aid, and minor support medical treatment, minor system repair. Then we have the matrix here. Has anybody never seen this? Very well, so we all are familiar with this. So going over on that last slide, this is how you're going to break it all down by class and by letter. So likely, probable, may, unlikely. 5 steps of the risk management. So identify the hazards. Went over that already. Objective is to identify all risks and hazards that are most likely to result in human losses, damage to equipment, or mission degradation. Assess that. You know what? Let me go back real quick. So this last part on this first bullet, this is how that breaks down. So you're going to take, which we'll go over in a little bit, how to do like a job hazard analysis, but historical hazards, a little bit of recon on that. Experience of leaders, personnel, unit SOPs is a big one. So is there a written standard operating procedure for what task at hand that has a hazard associated with it? Unit's action history. So mishap reporting. Assess the hazards, literally figuring out what it is. Manage or make risk decisions. Implement controls. So this one right here, these hierarchy of controls. So elimination, are we able to completely eliminate the hazard by an engineering control. So for example, we have a HVAC system that is very low, or that is outside of the ceiling or walls or what have you, and it's dripping. Well, can we implement something to where we can enclose that so that there's no more hazard? So that would be an engineering control. Substitution, can you substitute for something else? That engineering control, and administrative and PPE. Administrative is just science. Administrative is that's why it's low on the totem pole, because most people don't listen to science. Supervise and evaluate. For each control, enter how each control will be monitored to ensure it is implemented. Direct supervision, continuous supervision, spot checks. 4 rules. We all know this. We've all seen this before.
Under the false impression that water fog would help the situation by eliminating sparks inside the tank. However, this line of reasoning may have helped lead to the disastrous results that followed. The fog line may have injected air into a vapor-rich atmosphere. Also, the application of water to the cutting surface does not reduce sparks, as can be seen. As the third side of the hole is cut, an explosion occurs. 15 rescuers instantly become victims themselves, all suffering the effects of concussion caused by the blast. Because proper protective equipment was worn, only minor burn injuries occurred. Other firefighters rushed to the aid of their fallen comrades. As the casualties were assessed, it became evident that one rescuer had been gravely injured and was later to die.
So that video right there, so the background on that is someone got stuck in a corn silo, and it was a closed off corn silo, so they fell in there and then it closed on them. And so the firefighters were dispatched to go out there, but what they didn't know is that corn silo started to pressurize. They started to cut into it, it had that negative pressure, and what happened? They cut into it, sparks caught it, and it blew up. So all that pressure got released, and so those firefighters got blown back. And then the sad part about that is one of those firefighters ended up dying. So what they didn't know was that additional hazard to what they were already encountering. So they already knew they had a person in there, but what they didn't know is that that tank had become pressurized, and that one spark ended up making the side of it completely blow out. So we all know this: time critical, deliberate, and in depth. RM off duty. Applying risk management only on duty is likely putting a Band-Aid on a severed leg. Command oversight with involved leadership at all levels and creative intervention can and will prevent off-duty mishaps. It's all the training that we go through, ROTS, recreational off-duty training. So we try to implement it. Does it still happen? Yes, especially out here in Hawaii. Ocean safety is a big one. You know, if people aren't aware of the hazards, or they're not used to swimming in open water or in the ocean, something bad can happen. So we always want to make sure that we're implementing it on and off duty. So that JHA, this is the job hazard analysis. So the 1910 again, which is that OSHA CFR Code of Federal Regulation, the employer shall verify that required workplace hazard assessment has been performed through a written certification that identifies the workplace evaluated. So all that's really saying is that if we have a hazard identified, so for instance, motor tees. So if we're working in a motor tee that has either a welding shop or something to that effect, what are the hazards that are associated with that? Do they have the proper ventilation in there? Do they have the proper welding mask, proper PPE? Do they have respirators? So that's identifying the hazards and then coming up with how to implement those controls. What is a JHA? What I was just going over. sometimes called a job safety analysis, is a technique that focuses on job tasks as a way to identify hazards before they occur. Why are they important? Many workers are injured and killed at the workplace every day in the United States. You can help prevent workplace injuries and illness by looking at your workplace operations, establishing proper job procedures, ensuring that all employees are trained properly. So those last two are the two important ones. But they're all important, but these last two, establishing proper job procedures. So in the beginning I said, well, we've always done it this way, and nothing's ever happened. Well, okay, is that the correct way though? Or is there a better way to do it? Ensuring that all employees are trained properly. So that video that we watched earlier, and I said it's sad to say, but all anybody investigating is looking at is where they trained, who they trained by, and what's the documentation. Show me what the documentation is. Job hazard analysis can be conducted on many jobs in your workplace. Priority should go to the following types of jobs. Jobs with the highest injury or illness rates, so that's taking a look at prior accident reporting and seeing if there's either something new or if it's still the same hazards associated with that task. Jobs with the potential to cause severe or disabling injuries or illness, even if there is no history of previous accidents. Jobs that are new to your operation or have undergone changes or processes and procedures. So these are the 4 steps. I won't break this down too much, so save on a little bit of time, because this can get into the weeds very easily. But these are the 4 steps. Select the job or task, break down that task, identify the hazards, develop and implement control.
Just hand it to them.
Select the job. Involve all the employees. Aware of many hazards, buy-in, new accident history. Break down the job. So, outline job or task steps. So that's literally going up to that person or that Marine who's using either that machine or a piece of equipment and saying, what do you do? How do you do your job? And how does that break down? Like start from step 1 and then bring me to the end of the process. What is done? Describe the steps or tasks. Ensure corrective sequence. Rule of thumb, about 10 steps. Avoid too much or too little detail. That one I don't really like, because if you're actually breaking down a job hazard analysis, you should go as in depth as needed. So if that requires you to have 3-4 pages, then it requires you to have 3 to 4 pages in order to implement that control for that hazard. Too detailed. Let's take a look at those. That's kind of what we're not looking for. Not enough detail. Part, replace tire, drywall. Identify the hazards. Interview employees, that's what I was talking about earlier. Literally sitting down with them and saying, hey, how do you do this task? Or watching them do it and then writing down your notes. Conduct assessment of the job. Use job task outline as a guide. Focus on potential hazards. This job task outline, you can find those anywhere. You can literally type it into Google. There's no specific one that pertains to each job hazard analysis. Common hazards. So I want to break this down for you guys and let you know what you might be looking for. Like, what does that look like in the real world? So chemical, toxic, flammable, corrosive, so hazmat lockers, flammable cabinets, lithium battery storage, all those. Explosion, reaction, and overpressure. We're all familiar with that one. I'm not going to go over that. Electrical safety, so shock, short, fire, static, power loss. Ergonomics. So ergonomics, that can be kind of tricky, but the simple task for that is if you have a Marine or sailor that works at their desk all day, they're hunched over, and they come to you and they're complaining about, I think I have carpal tunnel, or they go to medical or what have you, and the medical says, well, maybe you should get an ergonomic assessment. Well, someone like myself will come out and be like, hey, maybe this Marine should get a desk designed to fit, so they don't have, pain in the wrist, neck, back, what have you. That's all ergonomics is. And then also too, it can go into machines and equipment as well. Excavation or collapse, so that's trenching and shoring. Fall, so slip, trips, and falls. Fire key, mechanical, chafing, fatigue, failure. Noise hazards is a big one in the Marine Corps. Radiation, struck by, mass acceleration by or against, temperature, visibility, and weather. These are all the things that you're looking at when you're trying to identify the hazards and then figure out what you can change for that pass. This is how it breaks down. Let's take a second to look over that. It's really just the formalities. There's the RM again. Develop and implement controls. Elimination, most effective but difficult to implement in an existing process, kind of like what I was talking about earlier with the HVAC system. Design or development stage or preferred, physically remove the hazard. Substitution, replacing it. Engineering controls, designed to remove the hazard. Wheels or struts versus skids. Close the hazard, tail rotor, drive shaft cover. Isolate the hazard firewalls. Admin controls, so those operators manuals, crew endurance program, ammunition control, alarm signs, warnings, and training. So what we're doing here right now. PPE and a combination of everything. PPE is the last thing that we're trying to implement. If all else fails, then we go to PPE. Key job steps. Same thing that we were going over earlier. This is how it would look. If you just take that and you apply it to what goes on in your environment, substitute it. Here's one broken down for you. So what do they have? Lifting vehicle. Vehicle rolling while jacking vehicle up. Then they give it their initial track. They give it a 2, so that'd be a critical. Now, what are the controls? Vehicle falling on personnel. So they give that a 1. That's that IDLH, that imminent danger to life and health. So now, how are they going to reduce that? Removing tire. Weight of tire causing back injury. Keep vehicle and wheels close to the ground to prevent distance from wheel hub to the ground, decreasing the amount of lift and pull. Use wheel jack or buddy system. That's just how it's breaking down. Try to reduce the hazard. Other benefits of a JHA. Why might you uncover new hazards with a JHA? May have been overlooked, developed after production started, changes in work procedures or personnel. Any questions? You guys good to push? Or we need a break? Push. So now we're going to get into some of the actual toxic substances, chemicals that you're going to find on base. One of them being lead. So lead is a big hazard on Marine Corps Base Hawaii, and the reason for that is a lot of these buildings are very old. So in regard to lead, on the periodic table, that's its symbol right there. So lead after, so 1978 and after, OSHA and another regulatory body, they said no more lead in paint. So anything after 1978, I think they gave them until 1981, to all production of lead-based paint is to cease. So they did give them a couple years of leeway, but you're going to find it all over the base because what people do, and there's nothing wrong with it, they'll just encapsulate it. So that first coat of that lead paint will go on a lot of these buildings, the older ones, and then it'll start to deteriorate. They'll say, okay, how do we abate that or how do we mitigate that? They'll come in, they'll encapsulate it with a new coat of paint. Well, that lead-based paint is still there. So when that second or third or fourth or fifth coat starts to deteriorate, that lead-based paint is coming back. That's just a little bit of background on what you might see here on base. Does that constitute a health hazard? Not necessarily. Here's the signs. So I'm going to break down these signs for you. So, caution. This room contains lead-acid battery systems. So that's just letting you know that you're about to enter an area where you might have lead-based paint. Warning. People working with lead-based paint, so do not go in that area. And then danger, this is the constant. Poison, lead work area, authorized personnel only. Common uses for lead: ballast weights, solar, ammunition, gas, smelting, pipe, paints and coatings. So gasoline, they took that out 1980. Lead batteries, that's still a big one. But as far as what you're mainly going to see, motor T, you might see this a little bit, but it's going to be those lead-based paints. Operations that can cause exposure. Most common exposure, removal of lead-based paints, including carcinogens. Grinding, sanding, or welding material that contains leads, soldering with torches, or soldering. Lead-acid battery reclaiming. We're just kind of going over it. The most common is lead abatements, or the actual complete removal of lead. That's where you're going to find it the most. Lead-based paint materials. So on this picture, lead-based paint in and of itself, or lead in general, it's not hazardous to your health if it's where it is. It's not deteriorating. But if you see this middle picture right here, that's what I was talking about earlier. You're starting to see that paint that's deteriorating. Now it starts to become a hazard. Entry to the body. So you got inhalation or ingestion. So occupational safety-wise, we are concerned with lead-based paint or lead hazards, but the EPA and another regulatory body, their main focus for implementing controls and rules and regulations was for kids, was for children. If some of you weren't aware, that's where it all started. And then as far as occupational safety-wise, Dad and Mom goes to work. They work all day around lead-based paint or lead hazards in general. They come home, they pick their kids up, they're tracking it on their shoes in the house, and then that child ended up getting lead poisoning from that. That's how this whole thing started. As far as first they implemented it with in regard to children and lead poisoning, and then they said, okay, well, kind of doing like a JHA, they said, okay, well, how do we implement controls for the workplace? Because these kids are getting sick, but the parents are bringing it home, whether that's on their clothes, shoes, what have you. Any questions on lead? Very well. Asbestos. Asbestos. So this is another big one. Break it down. What is asbestos? A naturally occurring mineral. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of this. I mean, if you're in the Northeast, you might see it a lot more than you see it up here. We're not in Hawaii in particular, but more on the West Coast. Mined from the earth, strong and long-lasting, incombustible, highly resistant to chemicals, poor conductor of heat and electricity. That was the main one for starting to implement asbestos. They thought back in the 60s that, 50s and 60s, that, oh, okay, this stuff is great. Not knowing the hazards that we know now, cancers and other health issues that asbestos ended up causing. What is asbestos? I'm going to break this down for you guys. All types of asbestos tend to break into very tiny fibers, up to 700 times smaller than the human hair, must be identified using a microscope. Once released into the air, they may stay suspended for 24 hours or more. So asbestos is very, very fibrous, and once it's out into the air and then it settles again, those fibers are still on the ground, walls, what have you. So you just go walking through it again, start kicking it up. Well, you just reintroduce it into the atmosphere. Whether you touch it, and it goes in your mouth, but the big one is inhalation. Friable, crumbled or reduced to powder by hand pressure. Friability, likelihood that fibers will break loose and become airborne. So you'll see that a lot of times in tile, like, I'm not going to say 100%, but probably underneath all this carpet, that initial layer of tile or what was laid down, that it was probably laid with asbestos-containing material. You rip that up, what is the likelihood that those fibers are going to come up? Well, you start ripping it up, and then you just introduce it in the air not knowing that the hazard is there. And then non-friable, usually found bonded into other materials. That's where you'll see the tiles, the walls, soundproofing. That was a big one. So, non-friable ACF, floor and ceiling tiles, siding, fire doors, etc. Won't release fibers unless it's served or damaged in some way. See a lot of this on shipyards, not so much anymore. It is still there, they have encapsulated it, but a lot of times in shipyards or on ships, that insulating material that they used to cover all the pipes, that was all asbestos. You ever see the commercials for mesothelioma, talking about, did you work in a shipyard? That's what they're getting at. Asbestos-containing material. Thermal system, insulation, so insulating materials. Surfacing materials, your tiles, wall panels, partitions. Fireproofing was a big one. Acoustic and decorative plaster, so sound rooms. Textiles, friction materials, brakes, clutches, etc. We all heard that one too. I don't know if you've seen the commercials for it. Papers and adhesive, flooring and roofing materials. Filter sealants and caulks and gaskets. So the same thing with lead-based paint aboard Marine Corps Base Hawaii is the same thing with asbestos. A lot of times they won't encapsulate it or they won't do anything with it. They'll just leave it, do not disturb, put a sign up, or completely close off the area if it is a large hazard. Like I know some of the basements here on base facilities has completely closed and locked them and put signs up stating you cannot go in there. And that's because even to remove all that is going to be more hazardous than leaving it where it is. So those pipes that I was talking about earlier, siding, fire door, it's going to be a little hard to see what that is. That's just the internals of it, that fire resistant material in between the two fire door walls. Sprayed on fireproofing material. Vinyl flooring, that's what I was talking about earlier. People, the initial layout of that room may be built prior to when they banned asbestos use, and then people just put another layer and another layer and another layer, and then you go to remove it, and you just introduced asbestos into the air. Entry into the body. Airborne fibers inhaled deep into the lungs can cause damage and stay there for a very, very long time and present health hazards very far down the road. So you might be exposed today and not see anything for another 20, 30 years. So we're trying to stop it now. Fibers damage to the respiratory system. It may travel to the, can't pronounce that word, sorry, membrane lining of the lungs. Target organs. So this is a big one. All of those organs. Asbestos exposure. So mesothelioma. Latency period, 25 to 30 years. Very long. Asbestosis, white lung disease, scars on lungs. Not a cancer, but a progressive disease. Scarred lungs cannot get O2 into the blood. Latency period of 15 to 25 years. Lung cancer. So we're starting to see that, you know, a lot of these, and especially in lead as well, these are going to be health hazards that are developed very far down the road. Risk factors. 3 things influence the likelihood of developing an asbestos-related disease. The amount and duration of exposure, whether that's acute or chronic over a period of time. Age. The younger people are when they inhale asbestos, the more likely they are to develop mesothelioma. So same thing with lead. We started this with children being exposed. The reason for that is because the time it takes for them to become sick is a lot less than full-grown adults. Cigarette smoking, that's very self-explanatory. We all know the hazards now. Any questions on lead or asbestos? Now we're going to get into safety data systems, safety data sheets. How do we control hazmat, and how did OSHA and the rest of the world implement globally harmonized system, the GHS. Federal OSHA requires employers to train workers on new labels, elements, and safety data sheet format to facilitate recognition and the understanding. You have always had the right to know about hazards that you were exposed to on the job. So what's that saying is, just only within the last 10 years, you should be called an MSDS, so your Material Safety Data Sheet. And the reason why they changed that is because, so you buy a chemical, that chemical comes from Europe. Well, Europe has their own safety data sheet, and then it gets received in the United States. You go to read it, compare it to your safety data sheet, and you can't really delineate between the two on figure out what the hazard is and the severity of it. So what they did is everybody got together and they figured out how to come up with a standardized system. United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development in 1992 mandated a globally harmonized chemical classification and labeling system. So United States, Canada, Europe, and additional UN members. Those are all the ones that got together to come up with a standardized system for all hazardous materials. GHS was formally adopted in 2002, so actually very recent. UN, Committee of Experts on the Transportation of Dangerous Goods and Labeling of Chemicals. So the classification and labeling of chemicals. We're going to go over that right now. So that is the GHS form right there. And then if you see all the different ones that go into it. So you have NFPA at the top. That's the National Fire Protection Agency. That is the governing body to which OSHA pulls all the information as far as fire protection goes. NFPA has a multitude of different regulations, whether that's fire, electrical, combustible materials. The list is endless. There's like around 2,000 different handbooks and guidelines as far as NFPA. Then you have Canada's version, and then Europe's. So they're all different. That's what I was talking about earlier. Well, how do I differentiate between the two? You know, well, Canada's saying one thing, NFPA's saying another. In Europe, they're not really saying much. So what they did is they came up with the standardized system that everybody agreed on. So anywhere in the world, you know what you're getting. Notable changes to that system: labels are more defined and will now require product identifier, pictogram, signal word, hazard statement, precautionary statement, name, address, and telephone number. So I was talking about earlier, it used to be called MSDS. Now it is called the SDS. So if any of you have at your hazmat areas, hazmat lockers, flammable cabinets, hazardous accumulation sites, if any of you have the old MSDS, please update them and have it say SDS. If you do not want to spend the money at Certmart to buy the SDSs, you can literally go ahead and take material out of it, and that suffices. Now you are compliant. Does it look the greatest? No. But does it work? Yes. Hazardous communication program. 5 main requirements. for a complete hazardous communication program. Written hazardous communication, so what do you guys have on site? Chemical inventory, labels and warnings, STSs, and employee training. All that can be compiled into a binder for your guys' hazmat rep. If you do not have a hazmat rep, this is just a tidbit of information. You can contact environmental, and they have an ECC, so an environmental compliance control officer. It's like a 2-day course, I think, and you sign up with them. Now you have a official hazmat rep. Additionally, at Base Safety, we offer the hazardous communication class. It's about an hour long, and it just goes over this whole program. These are the pictograms. Take a second to familiarize yourself with these. These are the elements that I was going over earlier. So we have the signal word, danger. Symbols, or those pictograms that we just looked at. So what are the different hazards that are associated with it? Is it acute toxicity, flammable, compressed gas cylinder, or radiation? These 4. And then, what is the actual product? So, carbon monoxide, hazard statement associated with that, so phrases describe the nature of the hazardous product, and oftentimes the degree of hazard. Hazard classes, we will go over in the next slide. Precautionary statements: keep container tightly closed, avoid breathing vapors. If inhaled, remove victim to fresh air and keep at rest in a position of comfortable breathing, for breathing. And then it says contact poison control. So here we are. So that hazard statement, that physical hazard. Now, on this GHS, you can literally Google it, and it'll give you every single safety data sheet that that product has. It's 16 pages, which you'll see in a second. And it's breaking down all of this. Now, this is where it starts to differ. So you have NFPA on this side saying, okay, well, how are we going to identify this hazard class? Well, 0, minimal, slight hazard, moderate, and so on. Then you have the GHS that's saying 1 is severe hazard, and it decreases as the numbers increase. So they didn't get it completely right, but they tried their best. So on that STS, when you pull it from the GHS, it'll give you all these 16 statements. That is what will be included. You can literally print that off. It is, public access. And the materials that you order or have on station should have one of these associated with it. Now we go into respiratory protection. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break, let you guys go, stretch your legs. If you need to use the restrooms, they're in the back there. So this next portion right here is respiratory protection. This is a big issue. I wouldn't say issue, but this is a big, I'll go ahead and say problem in the Marine Corps as far as the implementation of a proper respiratory protection program. So we're going to go over how it all breaks down. First, get this funny picture right here. All these people are in SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatuses, and you got him just standing there, all willy-nilly, he doesn't really care. And what they're dealing with, who knows, but should he be that close? Probably not. This is the OSHA standard that goes with respiratory protection, and then that breaks down on the air side as well as the ground side for the Marine Corps. So every person or every unit that has or that is required to use respirators falls under this, and then whatever directive that the Marine Corps has implemented or the Navy, they can either be more strict or meet that standard. or they can never be more lax than what the 29 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, has already implemented. So that section on the CFR is .134, and what it entails is assess the workplace and provide respirators when necessary to protect the health of employees. Develop and implement a written respiratory protection program. That is a big component to this. There needs to be in a written SOP. Provide training on how to properly use respirators. Most people that are that need respirators, they get taught in the schoolhouse. A big issue that we're seeing right now as far as the safety management system side of that is it's not to the proper standard. And so a lot of these schoolhouses are having to revamp how they implement respiratory protection prior to these Marines and sailors hitting the fleet. Provide medical evaluations at no cost to the employee. So for us in uniform, that's going to be VUMED and then medical. For DoD civilians and contractors, we are not worried about. They need to be able to implement their own safety program as far as respiratory protection. But DoD civilians, that will fall under you guys. So as far as MLR, if you have any DoD civilians that require respirators, that still needs to get tracked by the unit. The lungs. Inhalation is the most direct route to the bloodstream. Inhalation of hazardous materials damages the delicate structures of the lungs. Damaged lungs are more susceptible to respiratory, respiratory hazards. Respiratory protection is required when employees are in areas where effective engineering controls are not feasible to protect the health of the employee from lack of oxygen, harmful dust, fogs, fumes, mist, gas, smoke, sprays, or vapors. Respiratory protection must comply with NIOSH. So NIOSH is that regulatory body that I was talking about earlier that falls under the Navy. So Navy took that from OSHA and then implemented their own. I do want to touch on this. So anytime that you're grinding, brazing, welding, you need to be wearing the proper PPE associated with that. And that could be just as simple as, what are you grinding? Are you grinding paint or metal? And is it producing particulate or smoke? You know, and you're inhaling that, that's obviously bad to go. Some engineering controls that go with that, as it's stated up at the top, is you have proper ventilation for that. So that could be an engineering control, other than having PPE, because we know that PPE is the last line of defense. So if we can implement an engineering control, whether that be a hood system or actual ductwork that can attach to the worker or near the worker while they're, completing the task, and that could be an engineering control. I would add to that as well as either having a half-face respirator, which we'll go over the different types of respirators, or some other form of respiratory protection, in addition to an actual engineering control, whether that be a hood system, an actual HVAC that pulls particulate, or ductwork that can be near the worker. Respiratory protection. Exposure levels exceed PEL. So what PEL is a permissible exposure limit, and that is measured in parts per million, whereas something like lead, that is measured by either micrograms per square centimeter or micrograms per deciliter, whether it's solid, in its solid state when it's applied and dried, or whether that's in the actual container and it's still in the liquid form. Then parts per million, what we're measuring is what is in the air. So we take an air sample by a monitor on someone or attached near the work area, and that draws the air in, and then it gives you back a measurement of in parts per million. So that's what PEL stands for. During installation of engineering or work practice controls, where I was talking about earlier, maintenance and repair activities that may result in exceeding the PEL. What we're talking about there is the grinding and abrasing on materials. I'm trying to associate that with what you guys might see at your unit. As far as inhalation from toxic substances, as far as fueling processes and things like that go, you're not really going to be exposed to that unless you are trying to refuel one 55-gallon drum to another 55-gallon drum. You're just transferring it, but you're doing it inside of your hazardous accumulation site, which is bad to go to begin with, but sometimes you don't have any other option. But you're just down there and you're inhaling those vapors. That's always bad. So now knowing what I know now, I will never, I like the smell of gas, but now knowing what I know, that's bad to go. So emergency response, where type and concentration of contaminant is unknown, voluntary usage. Medical surveillance. So I touched on earlier, BUMED implements what the actual medical facilities need to have as far as respiratory protection and then other hazards. But if you do have DoD civilians and they are under respiratory protection, hearing conservation, and a few other things, that does still get tracked by your unit safety officer. These evaluations are required for all respirator users except for employees who voluntarily use dust masks for the use of escape-only respirators. Medical evaluation records will be retained for 30 years beyond the employee's employment. The reason for that is because we talked about, when we touched on asbestos, things start to come up later in people's lives. There's documentation saying that they were exposed to something certain. So that's, once again, that's all the lawyers coming down during litigations. Well, show me, where's the paperwork? That's how that gets implemented. Well, now you don't have to retain things for 30 years. Respirator selection. Limitations and characteristics of available respirators, toxicity and concentration of hazardous material, chemical and physical properties of the contaminant, and an amount of oxygen present. So how does that break down? So it might be a little bit hard for some of you to see, but whenever I teach this class, how I equate it to is we all have an M50 mask, our gas mask. That is a full face respirator if you really think about it. Is it to the degree that it's going to protect you from other toxic substances? Maybe. I'm not CBRN, but when it comes to everyday work practices, we have full face respirators at the top here, which are P100 filters, or actually your self-contained breathing apparatus, excuse me, and then down there your half face or half face with shield, and then all your different filters, P100 filters. This one's down here, which in my opinion are trash because they're hard to maintain and they crack and they exposed to literally just air and they're not very good. So the P100s that are, you see right here, they're plastic, those are a better choice. Now, how do we measure that? So toxicity and concentration of hazardous material. So when you are doing a job hazard analysis to try and figure out, okay, what respirator do I actually need? Well, what am I doing? Am I welding? Okay, well, what's the off gas of welding? Well, we know when we're welding, just for example, stainless, we have chromium-6 that can be going into the air. That is very toxic for the body. And what respirator is associated with that? Half-face respirator with P100 filters that can withstand an 8-hour period. So that time-weighted average of 8 hours. So we measure that by taking air samples, visual inspection. Okay, can we literally see the fumes coming off of it? And then vapor control. So are we sucking that air into an apparatus and then measuring the concentration within that apparatus? And then from there, we know what our PEL is, that permissible exposure limit is, and then we know in whatever we're measuring, parts per million, or an actual, micrograms per square centimeter, or what have you. Then we know, okay, well, this mask is rated for this substance or this exposure limit. Now we can implement the proper. Now we can acquire them and implement the proper PPE. So proper wear. This is a big one. So when you guys go through seabird training, we all do cover it, inhale, make sure you have a tight seal. So when you go in the gas chamber, it's not automatically getting in your eyes. It's the same thing. So employers shall not permit the use of respirators for employees that have facial hair that interferes with the seal or valve function of the respirator. Same thing with our M50 mask. I always tell you, get your hair out of the way before you put your mask on. If PPE is used, such as corrective lenses, the employer will ensure that the PPE will not interfere with the seal of the respirator. So those attachments that they give Marines, that medical gives Marines in order to put in, they put in their gas mask. Same thing applies to respirators. And then has not met the medical and fit testing requirements. So we offer a base safety fit testing. That way your personnel can bring their respirators to base safety. We hook them up to a test, and we make sure that it is fitting properly and that they're not getting any particulate or airborne substances into that mask. Fit testing is required for all employees using negative or positive pressure tight-fitting respirators. So that negative and positive, all we're talking about is the difference between a half-face or a full-face SCBH, so self-contained breathing apparatus, which is using that negative pressure. Maintenance. This is what I touched on earlier. This is what I see a lot is the maintenance of it. They will have it, but where is it stored? How is it stored? Is it close to the work? Another one is it close to the work area? So you guys have them in file cabinets or what have you, close to the work area, but people are working in there for 8 to 10 hours a day, and then all they're in storage bags, but you open the storage bag and they're covered in dust, or the actual shelving around is covered in dust. So they're not storing them correctly. They leave the filters on. This is a big one. People will leave the filters on. They won't take them off because these filters are good for a week. Why would I take them off and put them on every day and then refit my test? Well, because if you leave them on and you just store it in there, well, you're still exposing that filter to whatever particulate that is, or gas fumes, vapors. All respirators must be cleaned, stored, inspected regularly. This is necessary to provide complete protection for the worker. The way you document that is the same thing that we document other things, like fire extinguishers, eye wash stations, what have you. They either get visually inspected and marked off by supervisors, or the end user, the worker themselves, and then verified by that supervisor. Cleaning. For the majority of respirators, it'll be the same cleaning process that you're told for your gas mask. Warm soapy water if you do not want to use soap. You do not have to. If you are going to use soap, detergent, Dawn dish soap is going to be your best bet. Don't use anything that's got any scents or anything different or added chemicals in it that could break down the actual material itself. Warm soapy water works fine. And then obviously take the filters off before you do this. Respirators should be cleaned and disinfected if used by more than one person. Disassemble the respirator and soak it in warm water and rinse with clean water. Respirators may be washed in a detergent solution and then disinfected in a sanitizing solution. Storage. Respirators must be stored to protect against dust, sunlight, temperature, moisture, and chemicals. Not to be stored in crushed crushed in lockers or toolboxes. That's what I was talking about earlier. Guys will get done with their shift, they just throw them down there in whatever toolkit, tool bag, Pelican case that they have. They come back in the next day, boom, grab it, throw it on, and start going to work. That's bad to go. Make sure that you're taking the extra 5 minutes to put it away, clean it, and put it away properly. Stored so that face piece and valve will rest in a normal position. So they give you that the face form for the M50 mask. It's the same reason. Respirators should not be stored by hanging them by the headband. All that's saying is so that it doesn't stretch out so you lose that proper fit test. Inspections. Respirators should be inspected before and after each use to ensure all parts are present and operating. Rubber and elastomer parts should be checked for pliability and signs for deterioration. Any worn or deteriorated parts should be replaced. Biggest one is those filters. I can't say it enough. I keep coming back to it because it becomes a problem. Use and limitations. The respirator is the last control measure to ensure safety to the employee. The respirator is necessary to prevent the inhalation of aerosols and contaminants. Employees must be familiar with the respirator and its operations. The respirator must have proper seal and effective valves in order to perform. So once again, if any of your personnel need to be fit tested, contact us at Base Safety and we can get them in and get the test done for them. Also, if you guys have any additional questions as far as what respirators do I have, or you already have a respiratory protection program, but you might need to relook at it, or if you would like us to come and look at it, we would be more than happy to come out there and look at what you guys are using and how you're using it. Employees must leave the area if the contaminant can be detected by dizziness, respirator is damaged, or breathing becomes difficult, employee must leave the area. Not all respirators supply oxygen to employees. Voluntary use dust masks, the N95, require training for employee. The manufacturer's operation manual should be used as a reference for additional use. I like to tell all the people that I help, just keep the operator's manual near it, by it, with the inspection checklist. That way you know exactly. You have new personnel come in, hey look, here's the manual, this is how I use it, and it'll break down everything for you. Any questions on a respiration program? So the only thing I'll leave you with as far as respiratory protection is please go back, see your leaders or corporals and sergeants as well, and look at how your program is broken down. Do you guys have an SOP associated with it? And then do you guys have the proper mask for whatever hazard that you guys are dealing with? And then now, if you didn't know, and you do know now, that it's not only just the fumes or off gases, it's also something as simple as what are you grinding on? Using an angle grinder and you're just grinding away, well, what are you using it on? The majority of us, myself included, we just go to work, but not knowing, like, okay, what is going into the air and what am I breathing in? So this is the VPP. This is more, I know this is supervisor safety and it is a training requirement for all of us. This is more for the civilian side. So MCCS runs their VPP program. And all it is it's a safety conference. Everybody gets together a couple times out of the year and they all have classes and they have conferences, people will speak, and they come up with new ideas and bring those back to their workplace and try to get things changed, or just good knowledge. VPP is an OSHA initiative that encourages private industry and federal agencies to reduce workplace injuries and illness through management and worker involvement. So, from the beginning of the course, this is the same thing, trying to change behavior and the culture within your environment. 4 VPP elements: management, leadership, and employee involvement, worksite analysis, hazard prevention and control, and safety and health training. You get all these at these conferences. Management, leadership. Management must be visible on a regular basis, discussing safety issues and demonstrating interest and dedication to employee safety and health. So this is how companies get recognized by OSHA in order to attend these VPP conferences. Understand their OSH responsibilities and be held accountable for this responsibility. Ensure workers follow worksite safety and health rules. Employee involvement. Employee involvement is an essential element for success in VPP. Employees must participate actively and meaningfully in as self-inspections, job hazard analysis, OSH committees, so occupational safety and health committees, problem-solving groups, safety advisors, and correcting hazardous conditions. So basically what they're saying is the company, are they doing what they're supposed to? Worksite analysis. We won't beat this in a dead horse. So, in the beginning, I said OSHA is the regulatory body. How does that break down for the Marine Corps? Here are your references. So the NAVMC, that's the directive. So 7, 9, and 10 deal with rules and regulations for occupational safety and health. NAVMC, the 1100 series, that's the OSH deficiency notice. That doesn't pertain too much to you guys. And then Marine Corps Order 5100.29 Charlie. This is the safety program. There are 8 chapters 1 through 8 with an additional volume, which we will go into next, which is mishap control and prevention. It's its own separate volume. But there are 8 chapters in this. And then once again, those regulatory bodies. So 29 CFR, the 1910 is general industry. The 29 CFR, 1926, that is the construction industry. A lot of the rules and regulations, they mirror each other. But obviously in the construction setting, you're going to have more hazards. It's not building code. It is to a certain extent. It's not going to tell you how to build a wall. It's going to tell you what you need to have as far as what you can and cannot do. Why conduct inspections? Now we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of your own work sites and your own spaces, buildings, what have you. So, ensure safe and healthful workplace that is free of recognized hazards. In the beginning of that RM process, you're going to see it again. Establish a good abatement plan to correct known deficiencies. Now we're going to get into mishaps. So, imminent danger situations shall be brought to the immediate attention of supervisory personnel for corrective action. So that's that whole see something, say something. And all of you in here from corporals and the NCOs, the staff NCOs and officers, you guys all can stop things before they happen. In the safety culture, especially here at our office, there's an absolute 100% No mishaps is what we strive for. Most frequent violations that you're going to see as far as deficiencies within your workspaces. Electrical safety is a big one. We tend to have a habit of piggybacking, which means plugging extension cords into extension cords. Tend to have a habit of plugging microwaves, air conditioners, coffee pots, hot plates into surge protectors or extension cords. It's not good because high amp appliances, you need to be able to plug them directly into the walls because they do draw a lot of amperage. If you plug them into a surge protector and then plug that into the wall, where you have a series of things, coffee pot, air conditioner, well, you're exceeding the load of that surge protector and you're exceeding the load of the actual wall outlet. So then that's how you can cause an electrical fire. We have exits locked, not marked. If you are going to lock an exit door, please mark it by stating not an exit and inform everyone that works within that area that we are not using this exit. There are these exits that you will be using. Eye wash stations in need of servicing. You see a lot of that on the ground side as far as motor T's go. Hazmat, so improper storage and STSs. Housekeeping, slip, trips, and falls. And ladders, machine guarding. Machine guarding is a big one, and all that is are we protecting against pinch points, the actual guard of the machine, whether that's a saw or something that's spinning that your hand or clothing can get caught in. And then we see PPE. We see again respiratory program. Are you guys implementing an actual respiratory program? Training, warning signs, weight load testing, and welding cables. Electrical hazards. Loose wires, ungrounded, not insulated, unmarked boxes, overloaded power strips. That's what I was saying earlier. Now that picture doesn't really do it justice because from what I'm just looking at right there, it looks like they're plugging in a lot of phone chargers and things that draw low power. So I don't really like that picture because what it should be saying is you have like a multitude of 12, 14 gauge extension cords plugged into there, or you're plugging coffee pots in, or you're plugging air conditioners in to that surge protector. That would be bad to go. But computers and monitors and things like that, that's more than fine. Housekeeping. So you see this, we see this a lot all over the place. Storage areas, motor tees is a big one. We see that a lot. And then general workspaces, there's storage boxes everywhere, there's papers everywhere, they're running cords all over the place. In the event of an emergency, can you get out? Or are you impeded by what you have around you? Chemical exposures. So labeling, written program, STS's training. Machine guarding. So that's what I was talking about earlier. Warning, keep guards in place, do not remove them. A lot of times people will remove the actual guards because it's easier for them to work. Tools and equipment, how are we storing them? And then how are we using them? Do we take the guard off the angle grinder because we need to get into a tight spot? Or are we going to try and figure out another way on how to access that material that we need to cut? Vehicle inspections, we all do that with our art form, but this is just for what OSHA says.
And then concrete workers to stop the Zambo.
Oh, God.
Apparently one more.
It's big work stoppage here.
Let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 people are now watching this.
Let's see what's going to happen.
16.
Okay, now someone's gonna put a stick in
We're
there.
walking away.
Somebody's got a big stick. A lot of activity. Okay.
Who got hired last? And who gets paid the least? Okay, we're gonna try a bucket of water. Hang a bucket of water on the handle.
Actually, I was thinking, oh, here comes a big stick. Here comes a big stick.
They're going to drown it with acid. We're going to try the big stick there. He's going to go flying across try to kill the engine with water and hit the big stick. Okay, now we're going to smother it with a tarp. We've now angered the machine. The machine is now angry. You dumbasses. This is hilarious. Okay, we're going to smother it with tarp.
This is actually gonna work, I think.
Oh, there we go. Right him in the hole. Oh, right him, cowboy. We now get in the hole. Oh, okay. 8 seconds. He is now blinded and mad. Oh, this. This has got to be YouTube.
The film is rolling, Howard.
All right, now we're going to, now that we've irritated him, thrown him in the hole. We're up to 18 people now.
It'll run out of gas eventually.
Grab it. We got $50 to the first person to grab the tarp. $50 and a free lunch.
Screw it, man, I haven't got any benefits.
I got it. Oh my gosh, we're still going now. It's not going down, it's fighting. The lions around the Indian gazelle. Oh no, there we go, $50 to the gentleman with the antlers.
And they did it. No, this is a funny video. I was gonna fast forward, but I was like, you know what, I want to see how this ends. Luckily, no one got hurt. What we're talking about is unsafe and unhealthful reporting. Report an unsafe or unhealthful working condition at the earliest possible time to prevent an injury or property damage. Encourage oral notification. So really what we're talking about is see something, say something. You can't change a culture if you're not bringing anything to the forefront and asking those tough questions like, hey, I know we've been doing this process for, since I've been here, but there is a better way to do this and there is a right way to do this. How are we going to change that? So unsafe, unhealthful reporting can come through our office or your safety officer. And you can notify them and there's an actual report that goes with it. Encourage oral notification to the supervisor first. An employee desiring anonymity may file a written report with the station safety office. Upon receipt of the report, the safety office shall notify the supervisor. The supervisor has 5 working days from the time the report was received to notify the safety office of that corrective action taken. So if you guys have this in the future, it is your responsibility to take corrective action and then let us know. The originator of the report shall be notified in writing of the corrective action taken within 15 working days. When employees are exposed to a serious, unsafe, unhealthful condition as defined by the safety office, a notice signed by the CO shall be posted in the vicinity of the hazardous condition. Take a second to let that digest because things can go from bad to worse very quickly if we don't take the proper steps and make sure that not only the person who's reporting it, but us included, are all on the same sheet of music. Copies get retained for 5 years. Report forms must be readily available to all personnel. You can contact your safety officer, which is Lieutenant Monzi, if you guys were not aware, which I know she will be stepping out of that billet, but you guys have 2 more. Staff Sergeant Ryan Morton, and then there's another one, I can't remember his name, but both of those two. Unsafe, unhelpful report log. Safety manager shall establish a log for it, an inspectable record used for follow-up of required corrective actions and response time. Now we get into mishap, investigation, reporting, and record keeping. I'll try to keep this as not as dry as possible. This gets very, how do I say it? You can get into the weeds with this very quickly as far as what to do, how to report, and what have you. But as supervisors, this does pertain to you. These are the references. So the OPNAVIS 5102, that's mishap reporting for the Navy. SecNav, that's the Naval Safety Command, that's their directive. And then the DOTI's 6055, and then our own bulletin, 5100.19, that is the Occupational Safety and Health Program. And in there, it'll state what is required for mishap reporting. Purpose: identify mishap causal factors and develop corrective actions to prevent similar occurrences. Ensure compliance with the references for safety investigation, reporting, and record keeping. Maintain a standardized system to investigate mishaps and hazards. Provide procedures for submitting reports in a timely manner. Here's the OSH program for Marine Corps Base Hawaii. Personnel report mishaps to the supervisor immediately. Supervisor informs base safety within 1 hour of being notified. And then you have our contacts. Now, I do want to make a point to this. Supervisor informs base safety within 1 hour of being notified. That depends on the classification of that mishap. And we're going to go over the different classifications. But the more severe that they are, the more stringent that they get. So within 1 hour, that's for something very severe. And then also, was it on or off base? Was it on or off duty? Because if it's off duty and it's a reportable mishap, you might not get notified to the end of the weekend. Everybody comes in on Monday. So I would take that at face value as far as the 1 hour reporting. Once again, supervisor, accident, investigation, report. Filled out by supervisor, reviewed by unit safety representative, supervisor forwards to base safety within 5 working days. Majority of mishaps will be handled by the qualified personnel, so the ground safety manager or ground safety officer, and then the command involvement as well, and then all the people that were involved with whatever mishap. Applicability, military. All Navy and Marine Corps, Marine Corps personnel on active duty or reserve status. National Guard, Academy cadets, Joint Service officers, and so on. Department of the Navy, and like I said, on or off duty. Civilians. All Navy and Marine Corps DoD civilians in a duty status. So if you guys have DoD civilians while they're on duty, we care about it. Once they are off duty, we do not anymore. That's the clear distinction. And then you have the rest, which don't really apply to us unless Navy and Marine Corps exchange. I don't know if MLR has anything to do with that or not. Or NAF employees through CDCs, so the Child Development Centers, the pool, a couple other ones that are under MCCS and how they're qualified, but they're not actual DoD civilians. What is a mishap? An unplanned event or series of events that interfere with or interrupt a process or procedure and result in a fatality, injury, or occupational illness to personnel or damage to property. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a person that is involved. It can be a vehicle mishap, an air mishap, or what have you. Injury to on or off-duty Navy or Marine Corps personnel, occupational illness. Injury or occupational illness to on-duty DOD or Department of Navy civilian personnel. That's what I was touching on earlier. Injury to non-Department of Navy personnel as a result of Department of Navy operations. For instance, a vehicle mishap with a JLTV running into a civilian car, like a crash or something like that. Damage to non-DOD property as a result of Department of Navy operations, and then equipment or property. So here are the classifications. That's what I mean by it gets into the weeds on how we classify them, so we're not going to drag this out. Class A, fatality or property damage in excess of $2 million. Those are the only two things that you really need to worry about as far as you all. Because then it starts to get into the weeds of, okay, well, is it on? Is it off duty? What happened? And then it gets very complicated. So to simplify it, Class A, someone died, or property damage in excess of meeting or exceeding $2 million. Mishap B and C. So this is more typically of what you'll see. So permanent disability, they lose an arm, a leg, eye, ear. Property damage in meeting or exceeding $50K, but less than $2 million. Days away from work resulting from injury or occupational illness. Now, when it says days away from work resulting in from injury or occupational illness, their meaning was someone hospitalized for 3 or more days. Anything less than that, it will be dropped down to a lower level. And then you'll see here how it applied. Yep.
So it says days away from work resulting from injury or occupational illness that includes psychological evaluation.
For after the fact?
Yes.
What do you think? So, as far as identifying what the class is, or for after the fact, because I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no. And the reason for that is because, yes, that is an injury, but medical has other ways of dealing with that. As far as, are they going to give this personnel leave, or are they hospitalized for, let's just say, maybe a 5150 or something like that nature? Is that a reportable mishap? Well, the mishap itself would be, but if that personnel came in or it was brought to their attention and then they ended up becoming hospitalized from that, that's not an actual mishap. So it would have to be an event that happened involving that person, but as far as the after effects of that, that would not constitute the actual classification. It would be the event itself. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Determining mishap costs. Once again, you can get into the weeds for this. The simple way to do that is anything above $5,000, you're reporting it. Total cost of a mishap is determined by adding the cost for all death, injury, or illness and equipment or property damage. Once again, anything over $5,000, and it's involving a GOV or personnel, then start the reporting process. Damage costs. Do not include damage to non-government property when damage occurs as a result of non-government activities. include damage to government and civilian vehicles and or property, and injury to personnel if mishap occurs in a DoD vehicle and the Navy/Marine Corps is responsible. So that's what I was touching on earlier, whether that's an internal crash, two JLTVs run into each other, or whether that's two JLTVs are out on the road and they end up having a mishap with another vehicle, or a rollover, and it involves non-DoD personnel. So both of those. Including environmental cleanup when calculating the direct cost of a mishap. So recently there was one that had happened, a JLTV rollover, spilled. The cost of that is calculated in what classification of that mishap is. So damage to the JLTV was X dollar. Then damage to the road and the actual spill itself, X dollar amount, as far as who got dispatched, how was it cleaned up, and what have you. Record keeping and reporting. All Class A, B, and C mishaps are reportable. All mishaps are reportable. The difference of what it's saying is A, B, and C, as I was trying to break it down for y'all, A, very bad, B, still very bad, C, we're starting to get into the weeds on whether it could be lower or higher, and then, but all mishaps are recordable. So that's what we're talking about, those near misses, which can turn into mishaps. We want to make sure that we are reporting and recording all the, back up, not reporting, but recording all these if it's not an actual reportable incident, so that we can implement controls and provide a better, safe work environment so that it doesn't happen again. Yes?
For A, B, and C, isn't like A is like death of serious injuries, and B is like over what, like $50,000 worth of damage, and C is like.
Yes, so, okay. We have A, right up here, we have permanent total disability, so fatality, permanent total disability, property damage of $2 million. I simplified that earlier. I'll break it down a little bit more because we have multiple questions, so we're going to break it down. So we have Class A, fatality, someone died. Permanent total disability, that's going to be legs don't work anymore, spine, neurological or brain damage, or loss of limb, ear, eyes, feet, hands, arms, and then other. Fatality as a result of a medical event within 1 hour of PFT, PRT, PFA. So someone that dies on a PFT class A. If they're on a training related fatality, that's a big one. All afloat Class A mishaps involving collision fire, grounding, or flooding. All Class B and C explosive mishaps. All ordnance impacting off range, and all live fire mishaps. This last section, all live fire mishaps. So anytime that there is a live fire mishap, it is automatically reported. Whether that was an ND in the ground and nobody was injured, or whether that was an actual blue-on-blue incident. Regardless of the severity, they are all automatically reported. But Class A, property damage meeting or exceeding $2 million, or a fatality. And B and C, permanent partial disability, hospitalization of 3 or more personnel, and then in addition to that, 3 or more days in the hospital. So if you have one person who's hospitalized for 3 or more days, that turns into a Class B or C depending. Or you have 3 or more personnel hospitalized for any amount of days, admitted to the hospital and being held for observation or actually having procedures done. Automatically B or C. And then the money, property damage, greater than 50K, but less, meeting or less than 2 million. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm saying when you start to get into the weeds on what classification it is. What I tell my safety officers is your ability to explain yourself to command when the classification of the mishap, it is always better, let's say, to go to B and then it gets reduced to a C. It's always better to say, hey, it's a class C right now, but what we're looking at, it could be raised up to a B, so that command is informed that, hey, there might be something more coming down the pipe. So that's how you want to break that down. You always want to be able to step up or step down with what your classification
So
is.
leaning towards like B, it would be more like if there was an injury involved, like injury, occupational risk, like, but if it's just like property damage, that would kind of be like more of a C.
Correct.
Like a C.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And then that's when you differentiate in between the money. So if there was no actual injury, okay, well, what are we looking at? Well, no one was injured, but we just wrecked, $1 million worth of equipment. Then that it's still going to fall under this. That's going to still be a class B. Does that clear it up?
Yep.
It's if you guys do have additional questions, or if you want to go through the actual course, we offer it at Base Safety. It's called Ground Mishap Investigation Course. All safety officers for the unit should be going to those. It'll break all this down, and it gets kind of confusing on how to classify something, but that'll break it down in depth. Mishap reporting. Simple answer: fatalities, disabilities, injury or illness, lost time, light limited duty, material, equipment, and property damage. So this light limited duty, we're not going to get wrapped around the axle with that. If someone sprains their ankle and they're on light duty, that's not a mishap. It has a time limit exceeded or attached to it. So, and all this can be broken down in the actual volume 9 mishap reporting guide. Immediate notification. Commanders must notify their COC, CMC, safety division, and then Naval Safety Command within 8 hours by phone or email. An on or off duty mishap, that's a Class A. On duty DoD civilian Class A mishap. The key word there is on duty. Mishap resulting in 3 or more hospitalized include CMC Safety Division or Naval Safety Command. And then an OPRA. Immediate notification: notify the nearest OSHA area or regional office by phone within 8 hours of obtaining knowledge of the mishap. So it says OSHA there. That's going to be our command. It's not going to be OSHA. It's going to be our command, and then it can get escalated however it needs to from there. All DON on-duty civilian fatalities occurring in the U.S. or U.S. territories, hospitalization of any civilian employee. Mishap records and logs. Used for tracking and trend analysis. Readily available for review at all times, and then retain records for 5 years. So that's how you're going to keep those record logs, which once again will be held with the safety office as well as command level 2. Reportable mishaps. On-duty military fatalities or permanent total disabilities resulting from a medical event that happened within 1 hour of a command-sponsored, that's the key word, command-sponsored PT, PFT, PRT, or PFA. DOD activities, evolutions, or operations resulting in the injury or death of a guest or military dependent. That one, the second bullet point, tends to get a little bit dicey as well on how we're going to report it and what is the procedure behind it. On-duty military training fatalities and high or moderate risk training mishaps resulting in the loss of 1 training day, rolling back or dropping a student from a course. Medically diagnosed work-related illness, injury such as musculoskeletal disease or cumulative trauma disorder, regardless if it involves further treatment or any time away from work. So, kind of to answer your question, medically diagnosed work-related illness, injuries such as musculoskeletal disease or cumulative trauma disorder, you can honestly classify that as something after the fact as well. So you really have to break it down on what's going to be the classification and what's going to be the reporting procedure and what is entailed in that. Portable mishaps. Work-related sharps, injury contaminated with another person's blood. So that's medical. We'll be dealing with all of that. Tuberculosis, military or civilian employee medically removed under OSH health standard, asbestos lead heat injury. So this goes into what I talked about earlier. Let's just say someone's welding on stainless, they get exposed to chromium-6, they go to medical, and then they are completely removed because they had an acute reaction to it. That gets automatically reported. The gaining command is responsible to submit the mishap report for fatalities and injuries that happen to military personnel while on PCS orders. Hopefully that does not happen to any of you, but that still becomes a reportable mishap. Say someone's coming inbound to you and something happens, it is the gaining unit's responsibility, not his prior unit if he is already detached. He or she is already detached. Navy and Marine Corps activities will do the mishap report for personnel assigned to unified or joint task force commands. And non-reportable. So property damage, death, injury from vandalism, riots, civil disorders, sabotage, terrorist activities, or criminal acts. That one's like a catch-all. Adverse reactions from drugs, prescription used under the direction of competent medical authority. Death or injury solely from illegal use of drugs or other substances. Now, in parentheses there, it says must report alcohol-related incidences. Simple way to break that down is if it is a alcohol-related incident while aboard Marine Corps Base Hawaii, i.e. in the barracks, or if it is a off-base alcohol-related incident involving the death of someone else. Now, if it's the death of the person for that alcohol-related injury, then you'd have to really look into how that's going to get reported. Most likely it will not be getting reported because that is a different...
So I'm a little confused. So,
yes.
like, an alcohol-related incident is not reported, but then it must be reported alcohol.
Yes, so alcohol-related incidences while on station, all reportable. When you're off station and off duty, it gets dicey as far as what you're reporting and not reporting. So to clear that up. If they're on base, alcohol-related incident, automatically reporting it. If it is off-duty, off-base, you'd have to figure out the exact classification in order to see if you're reporting it or not. Logs and work-related illness and injuries. Maintain a separate log for all on-duty civilians and all on and off-duty military personnel injuries and illnesses. Report all log entries via RMI, and it becomes the command's injury illness log. RMI is monitored by the unit safety representative. It's a website, not user-friendly, but that is how things get inputted electronically. Maintain a hard copy of log if RMI is not available. Logs and work-related illness and injuries. Make log entries within 6 working days from notification. Commands have 30 days from the mishap date to submit the completed RMI report. Your safety officer already knows this, but that 30 days is required by Naval Safety Command to have that report put in electronically. SIREP, work-related illness logs, mishap records, files, and summaries are for official use only documents on the SecNav 5100 or 5500. Hazard reports, this is a step down below the classification, so A, B, C, D, E, and then there's hazard reports. We're not going to spend too much time on this. This is ESAMS. Once again, we won't spend too much time on this. This is monitored. Our office uses ESAMS, and then the unit safety officer, they use ESAMS as well to input unit deficiencies, building deficiencies, training. So training that gets tracked by our office, fire wardens, all sorts of things. And then all civilian military mishaps and near misses. So that's going to be RMI. As far as ESAMS goes, there's not much in there. Safety training. Initial supervisor safety training provided by Base Safety. Annual supervisor training may be done online via TWIMS. For us, you have ESAMS or MarineNet. Annual refresher, once you have this course, you don't necessarily need to, but because there's a multitude of different ways that you can get supervisor safety and have an annual refresher. It's not just, you need to get it from Base Safety. OSHA provides these. They have online courses that's all free. New hire training provided by Base Safety. That doesn't really apply to us in uniform. We all get and sign our documents as a new join. So, supervisor responsible for employee training at their assigned work areas. And training must be documented. All you guys will be documented for attending this via the sign-in roster. right now to answer your question. All on, I stand corrected, all on, off-duty, alcohol-related incidences that involve a mishap, reportable. Whether that's as low as, guy almost drowned, or had a shallow drowning at a beach, but alcohol was involved, reportable. So just clear that up for you. So I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I might not be right on that one, so. Yep, no problem. Any questions over anything we've covered? We're coming to the end. Very well. That is it.
Hey, before we cut out, are you done with the